Hey Adventures, today is going to be another book review. This is for House of Suns by Alastair Reynolds. So House of Suns is a science fiction book. I don't know enough about science fiction or science fiction subgenres or anything like that to really go into any of the other subgenres that it falls under besides just science fiction. So I'm going to leave it at that and get into the review. So as I mentioned, I haven't read a lot of sci-fi, but I really liked what this story did. The setting was super interesting, and the way that the story played out and was directly influenced and affected by the setting was super interesting. I'm really glad that I can understand science a good bit. So the way my brain works is I have the brain that can understand the math science things, and if I would have cultivated that as a homeschooler, I would have studied more math science rather than history, language, arts side of things, then I would be very scientifically minded. And so I have the ability to understand the math science side of things, but I also am very focused on the history, language, arts side of things. So it's kind of interesting the way my brain works. But because of that, I am able to understand the science of things really well and really easily. And so I really appreciated seeing all the science that went into this and how those concepts and theories and everything played out. But if I hadn't been able to understand science as well as I do, I probably would have felt pretty lost, and I did, but I'll get to that in a second. But instead, what happened was I just got more invested in the story because of that science. I will say that I had a bit of confusion for a while because I didn't realize, I was listening to the audiobook and I didn't realize that it was switching POVs between the two main characters, Campion and Purslane. So once I figured out, oh wait, there's two characters and they're switching back and forth between the two POVs, then I understood, and then I could follow the story quite a bit better. Having the stories be set millions of years in the future was a good choice in many ways because it allowed us to separate the culture and the world or universe of that time period very easily, separate it from what we know of as modern times. And so that separation of time span, it allowed for there to be very different cultures, very different worlds, everything like that, but still some vestiges of what we know as human culture. The whole thing about there being different lines, different clones, family lines, whatever you want to call it, houses, I guess, was super interesting to me, and the way it was explained and how it worked and how these characters could live for that long made a lot of sense. There was so much about this story that was super intriguing to me and was really used to a great effect that even if I hadn't enjoyed the story, I could still appreciate what was being done with it. The various scientific theories and concepts were used very well. Some of them have been used before, things like black holes, wormholes, these types of concepts, machine peoples, there's a whole lot of different concepts and theories and stuff that are used in a lot of other sci-fi stories, but even though they're used in other stories, it didn't detract in any way from this story that was being told. In fact, most of it played into the story that was being told in a way that really enhanced the story rather than detracted from it. The ending, I felt, was a little bit abrupt in many ways, and I don't feel like we quite received the closure that we needed for the story to end. But at that same time, the open-endedness of the ending actually added to the story that was being told. So that's kind of confusing without having read the book. But basically, the book ends with some unanswered questions and some things that you still need resolved in your own mind, but they don't resolve them. And it's not because it's setting up for a second book or anything like that. It's just that this was the stopping point that the author decided to choose because of the way that it would make you think about the story and the ending. And so I did appreciate that as well. I also really liked the flashbacks that were used. I say flashbacks, they weren't really flashbacks, they were just a different moment in time that these short parts of the story were being told in. And they were the storyline of Abigail Gentian herself and her story and how it led up to the point where the Gentian line became an actual thing and how that cloning process was built up to and everything like that, and her mindset leading her to that point. So I appreciated that, and I thought that was a super interesting aspect of the story, but also one of the more interesting ones to me. Every time it came, that past time frame came up in the story whenever that storyline was being followed. I really got invested in it. I thought that was one of the more interesting parts of the story for sure. Overall, I enjoyed this book quite a bit. It's not my favorite book ever, but I enjoyed it a lot, and there was a lot about it that I liked, and overall just the reading it reinforced to me that it's not sci-fi that I dislike, which until relatively recently, about sometime last year probably, maybe the year before, was when I realized that I don't dislike sci-fi. It's Star Trek that I could never get into, and for some reason, knowing that Star Trek was sci-fi, my brain kind of equated the two as Star Trek is sci-fi, I don't like Star Trek, that must mean I don't like sci-fi, even though that's not, I understand that's not how stories work, and you'll always find exceptions, but I didn't realize that it wasn't sci-fi that I didn't like, and my brain just never allowed me to realize that, and so I haven't read a ton of sci-fi, but now that I have read this one, as well as Recorder and a couple other science fiction books that I've been reading more recently, it's allowed me to realize, okay, I actually do kind of like this genre, and I like some of the things that it's able to do. So I'm now going to be, in the future, reading more sci-fi. It's probably never going to be as much sci-fi as I read fantasy or even historical fiction, but it will definitely, my desire to read it has increased, and I will definitely be reading more in the future. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday. We have our social medias linked in the description down below. Is there anything else I need to say? Not really. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you guys again soon. Stay warm.